Ja, guten Tag, herzlich willkommen bei uns. This is dinner, dear speakers, dear guests. I'm Susanne Hilterlund, I'm the Danish Ambassador, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this Waste Heat Conference. And today the conference will focus on utilizing waste heat in order to decarbonize the heating sector. And we are very pleased and also a little proud to be organizing this together with the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, BMWK, because this falls in line with a number of activities we have done together over the last years. In the past, we have exchanged ideas about heat planning, energy efficiency and district heating, and we have had many delegation visits and workshops going back and forth. In fact, the idea for this event was actually created last summer when Director General of the Danish Energy Agency, Christopher Butchell, attended BMWK's district heating summit, I think it was in June. Therefore, I would like to thank both BMWK colleagues and the colleagues from the Danish Energy Agency for their continuous effort in contributing and driving this cooperation.
The amount of waste heat being produced equals the amount of heating and cooling. So of course this indicates a huge potential that lies within this sector. Today we want to dig into that and explore what governments can do and how framework conditions can secure the utilization of the waste heat potential. We will also hear about innovative concepts of Now, the curious thing about heat is that it's much a local issue. It's reserved. In my role, when I have been out and talking about energy, it's often been about offshore wind or it's been about hydrogen, and that is some separate. That's different in the sense that it's far, far away, and it doesn't relate to me very personally in the short term. And I think this is the case for many citizens. Heat is, however, close by definition. It's about yourself, it's about your own household, and it's about the people next to you. So everybody who either consumes or produces heat within a community is part of the equation. And this equation always needs to be solved locally. It simply doesn't make sense to produce heat in Denmark and deliver it to Germany, as we, for example, are doing in the electricity field. Therefore, heat happens on a local level, which is empowering, if you think about it. It brings about the chance of taking matters into local hands, creating local value locally, and becoming independent of fossil fuels and fossil imports. Therefore, local actors are the most important stakeholders in driving the heating transition forward and implementing it. And with that, I would like to welcome also the representatives of municipalities that are joining us today through a live stream function. I'm sure many of you are surely considering waste in your local heat planning, and we're glad to have you here. And on this backdrop, I would like to wish you all an insightful conference and networking afterwards. I will now pass the floor to Mrs. Diller for her introduction, please.
Thank you, Susanne Hilterlund, and welcome to all speakers and all participants, especially a warm welcome to Berlin for everybody who traveled from Denmark today, as I learned. Actually, last year I joined the German delegation to Denmark when we were discussing very interesting inputs and insights on both the subjects of energy efficiency and on heating and cooling. And I was really very impressed by the strategic approach Denmark is taking towards expanding renewable energies, localizing data centers, using the energy they have in surplus for heating networks. And we also had very interesting on-site visits in Copenhagen, even though I did not ski. I learned a lot about Copenhagen on every other subject. So this year, I'm happy we're hosting together with you this conference on how to deal with waste or surplus heat, which actually is exactly on the crossroads, or rather on the link between energy efficiency and heating. I think we do have an interesting program this afternoon. We will set the frame we will hear from academic insights, and also on how the legal and funding frame in Germany and in Denmark is set, and then we will look into best practice issues. Tomorrow we will have workshops where we can get a little bit more into depth, and as everything I think has already been said, I'm happy to welcome you again and hand over to our moderator.
Workshop or this conference. It is also the perfect venue to be having this conference because we look to Denmark. Cassandella has already said it. We look to Denmark for all things heat, for all things heating, especially centralized and district solutions. You have been and thought through a lot of the topics that we're facing right now in the years before, or even the decades before. But you are also facing some of the same challenges that we're facing now in terms of decarbonization, in terms of including and feeding in waste heat in order to really achieve a full decarbonization. That is why we all appreciate this platform now for mutual knowledge sharing, cooperation, and networking that you've provided here. Thank you for that. Thirdly, a small matter of housekeeping. We have a fairly tight schedule today. We move from analyzing the potential to diving deeply into implementation questions in the second session. So Q&A time for audience members is somewhat limited, and it's really up to the speakers and the speakers' discipline to leave room for questions from the audience. There will be ample networking time after each session. So after session 1, there's a coffee break. After the second session, we have a nice reception here, and that is thanks to the generous support of Danfoss, that we have food and drink and things to enjoy to our heart's content. So thank you, Danfoss, for your support here too. But now let's move into the first session, and this is lifting the untapped potential of waste heat. We have 3 speakers. Each, if you would roughly stick to 15 minutes, that would be wonderful. That leaves us time for a small podium and also some audience questions. And I would like to start with a man who I would almost say needs no introduction, but Aalborg may not be the city of the Little Mermaid, but it is the not-so-secret headquarters of Danish heat planning, as I have learned. So I suppose being appointed professor of energy planning at Aalborg University is kind of the apotheosis of any career in the field. And please welcome Paul Ossergaard.
Of course, I'm from Denmark, so I would never use such superlatives as you did. But yes, my name is Paul Ossergaard, and I'm working with energy systems and energy scenarios in Denmark. I would like to take an approach, or a big view on district heating. First of all, a few questions. Why do we even bother with district heating in Denmark? Denmark is the country in the world with the highest proportion of dwellings actually connected to district heating. We have about 2/3 of our houses connected to district heating. And why do we have that? If we compare with other countries, you go to Scotland across the North Sea, there's not one single house with district heating. Whereas if you go to Spain, you will actually find houses with district heating. So there's no climatic logic in when you have district heating and when you do not have district heating. I just learned that the amount of district heating in Germany corresponds to the amount of district heating that we have in Denmark, though, of course, the population is 16 times bigger in Germany. So the proportion in Germany, of course, is somewhat smaller than in Denmark. So why do we bother with it in Denmark? And what are the prospects, basically, of district heating? Those are the 2 things that I will try to probe into. Yes, that was my first one. First of all, I usually have 3 words when I describe why we bother with district heating in Denmark. That is convenience, cost, and conversion. Convenience, that means that I want to have 21 degrees in my house, and that's it. I want hot water when I turn on the water, that's it. I do not need to have a boiler I can fiddle with. I do not need to care about any technicalities. I need a Danfoss radiator valve thermostat that I can turn, and then my room gets warm. That's what I need. So convenience, that's a very big issue in Denmark, that you don't deal with anything. You don't have any costs. I have never paid for, I've lived in my house for 20 years, and I've never paid for any maintenance of my district heating installation. Cost, for 95% of Danish residents, the district heating cost they have is lower than the alternative of a natural gas boiler. So we have a very small proportion who would have been better off if they had a natural gas boiler. If we compare to electric heating or individual heat pumps, it's even smaller shares. It's something like 99.7% of district heating consumers. They are better off with district heating than if they have had an electric boiler in the system. The reason for that is not 100%, is that simply that we have also expanded to some places where people have made miscalculations. Heat density too low, gas prices too high, or electricity prices too low, or whatever. they have designed the systems according to. But for the vast majority of Danes, district heating is the cheaper option, and everybody wants to get it if they have the opportunity of getting it, basically. Lastly, my last C, that's the conversion. When we are converting the energy system, we're transitioning to carbon-free technologies. If you have a city of, let's say, 100,000 dwellings, well, if you have to address them individually because they each have their individual solutions, you will never transition that city. But if it's a district heating company who can basically make the change in-house, then it's a completely different situation. So basically, I'm living in Aalborg, and I don't care about how I transition my house because the district heating company does it for me. And it's the same throughout the country. A few numbers. We already heard that we could take all the waste heat that we have in Europe, surplus, excess. We have 3 different words, but if I use them, it will mean the same. We can take the excess heat that we have in Europe and basically heat all the houses in Europe. Another number is that 43% of the energy that goes into industry or into power plants is waste heat. So whenever you're putting 100 units of energy into some activity, then a lot of it goes into the nearest stream, the sea, into the air, or wherever you will blow off your heat to. So 43% could actually be used for something else. Secondly, 50% of the overall EU energy consumption, that goes to heating and cooling. So we have a very large potential for doing something. That's the positive way of saying it. Of course, the negative way of saying it is that we have a big issue there. But fortunately, we also have some very nice solutions. So district heating, that is definitely a proven methodology for tackling this issue. We have made various studies on a European scale and tried to see where do we have a nice concentration of heating demands, and that is the prerequisite basically for district heating. But something like 25,000, give or take, new district heating systems could actually be installed throughout Europe, and we could double it. These numbers are a bit old, so maybe I think we have a bit more than 6% of district heating now, but we could roughly, with a certain economic sense, also double the district heating demand. And of course, if we go for the full exploitation of the waste heat demand, then we could go even higher than that. So I have made 3 steps basically in my utilization of waste heat. The first one, that is basically what we call cogeneration of heat and power, where you actually take the heat from power production. And in Denmark, we don't actually consider this waste heat or surplus heat because it's so ingrained in our system that this is not waste. But go outside Denmark, then it is waste heat. Go to France, nuclear reactors. There's no exploitation of the waste heat from nuclear reactors, for instance. So cogeneration of heat and power. In Denmark, 1985, we had a few big power stations where you actually utilized the heat. And then we started heat planning, and then we moved electricity production out into the countryside, out into the small towns and villages and cities of all sizes, and basically located electricity production where you have a heating demand. And that's why you suddenly have all these new orange dots throughout the Danish landscapes. And then when you're driving in Denmark, you will see all these power stations located in the landscape because they all have a thermal storage, so you can easily recognize them. So that's one thing. Now, of course, we're moving offshore, and that means that all our power stations are going toward heat pumps or waste heat or whatever we can put into the grid. Secondly, that is exploiting existing surplus that we have in the system. This is a cement factory, but it could also be chemicals. I know that's a sulfuric acid factory in Hamburg, which is supplying a lot of district heating. Metals, any technology basically. In different categories, you will have different shares of the energy which could actually be used. In food stuff, it's like 10% of the energy that goes into it you could actually extract. In metals, I think it's about 25% of the energy that you put into them that you can actually extract as waste heat. Refineries, commerce, That's maybe one of the newer ones because that's a little bit more scattered. You don't have the very large ones, but I mean, when you have a small supermarket, just the cooling and freezing facilities they have, they can actually be picked up and put into a district heating grid and thereby supply heating to residents in the area. So it's just a matter of imagination that you simply have to look where do we have heating demands and basically, or heating surplus heat, and basically whenever you have whenever you have an energy demand, then you will typically also have a waste heat resource. Step 3, and this is where we are moving now and where we're also moving in Denmark. First of all, we have a game changer in Power-to-X because that is really going to generate vast amounts of surplus heat. And I'm not sure that the numbers that I think it will double the amount of waste heat that we basically have when we start looking into Power-to-X because of the conversion efficiencies of Power-to-X facilities, but also something like data centers. In Denmark, we're expecting them to 10-double in about 10 years, going up to 14% of the electricity demand in about 2035, I believe. And basically in a data center, you might have a data center using 200 megawatts of electricity, and that more or less translates into 200 megawatts, you can deduct a bit, of waste heat. So you have an enormous amount of waste heat from data centers. So that's also definitely going to be a game changer. So that was my 3 steps of utilization of waste heat. Let's look at heat demand concentrations in Europe, because when you want to have district heating, then basically you need to have a high density of heating demand. And strangely enough, if you look at this map, I said that Denmark is the place in the world with the highest proportion of district heating. It's only Copenhagen that actually has any kind of coloring on this map, despite what I said. So not having colors, that does not mean you don't have a potential. And you could also say that places with color definitely has a potential. So we have a lot of potentials throughout Europe. So whenever you have a color on this map, that means you have a very high heating density. So Paris, I mean, has a very large heating demand, but of course there's no district heating in Paris. You don't typically utilize waste heat from nuclear, as I mentioned. That's one of the reasons why you don't see anything in France, for instance. We also analyzed the ratio between how much is being produced and how much is consumed in given areas. These are not 3 regions of Europe. And again, the darker the color, the better the prospects basically for district heating. Again, you have some areas where there's no activity, but that does not mean, according to this map, but that does not mean you don't have any prospects or possibilities of district heating, because we do have good possibilities throughout Europe, especially if you take step 1 that I mentioned before, that you're actually moving the power production to where you have a heating demand. So those of you who are not into thermodynamics, whenever you're producing electricity, you waste a heck of a lot of energy in the form of heat. The same in your car, basically. So this is my colleague Urban Persson, who made this also in Heat Roadmap Europe. But he went into the EU register of all CO2 emitters, and he pinpointed them on a map. He found out what they're using the energy for, and he made this calculation of basically if it's food stuff, then it's like 10%. If it's metallurgical industry, then it's more like 25%. So, and then he found all the different point sources that we have of waste heat in Europe. So these are all the different sources that we have in Europe. Different colors are indicating different types. And you'll see also in Germany, of course, we have plenty of large point sources of waste heat that we can use. And again, Denmark actually also shows with a nice selection of of sources, but it does not even capture what we have in Denmark. So if we can expand that to other countries, it will not necessarily capture it, especially not if you are taking the electricity production and moving to places without current electricity production, but where you have a heating demand. Then you can go beyond this map here also. We made some scenarios of how can we basically design a European energy system. And if I just one comment about this, 70% of the heating we found here, or urban found, that is from power generation. And 25% that is from industry, and 5% that is from waste to energy plants. Okay. But as was also mentioned before, when we are looking into this, there's a local aspect. So basically, where do you have it? And do you have it nearby a heating demand? So that's one. So you have a spatial aspect. You also have a temporal aspect. Does it occur at the right time or not? And thirdly, you will have technical issues also. So when we're making these analyses, we're also investigating where does it happen, what is the profile over the year and over the day and so on. Does it actually fit into the energy system? So here, of course, waste incineration is actually something which is typically placed in the vicinity of the big cities and industry. Sometimes you actually put them far out in the countryside where you can't actually use the energy. Industrial excess you also have here. So even though this is 5 times higher than waste incineration in actual numbers, then since waste incineration is more controllable, we can use that a little bit more. Heat pumps, that is definitely something that we're also looking into in the future. And we will also combine them with waste resources, because whenever you have a waste resource, maybe it's at 20 degrees, maybe it's at 30 degrees, which is not sufficient for heating a house. But combined with a heat pump, it provides a very good opportunity for providing low-cost heating. I'm skipping this because I'm a bit short on time and it's not so interesting. But about the temperature levels, because what we are also doing is that we're moving towards lower temperature levels. And the lower temperature levels that you have in the district heating system, the more opportunities you have. For instance, if you take the heat from cooling in supermarkets, that will come at modest temperatures, whereas if you have something combusting or something, then you'll have it at higher temperatures. So you can't use the lower temperatures directly. Typically you will have in Denmark about 80 degrees, and I know that in many other places you'll have temperatures above 100 degrees. But the more you can push the temperatures down, the further you can actually use your energy or your waste heat. And moving towards the more complex fourth generation energy system or district heating system, you're going down to temperatures maybe 60 degrees, and that means that you have more options for using energy directly and not through a heat pump. Heat pumps are nice if you have something 20, 30 degrees, but if you have something at 60 degrees, then it's basically nicer if you can simply accustom the consumers to use temperatures which are lower. This is just a scenario that we made for Aalborg, where we have the surplus heat. Of course, we have some good facilities in Aalborg for providing surplus heat. So this is about 50% of the entire heating demand in Aalborg that we can easily supply with surplus heat. And it should be mentioned that this is based on a system where we have also looked into the temporal characteristics of power production, PV, wind turbines, and everything to basically create a system which is in balance. So it's not just a matter of having surplus heat and productions at certain times. They have to be at the right time, and you have to provide the flexibility measures to also use them in the system. Looking at how it's gone over the years, well, the top curve here, that shows the production from the big central power stations. So that is surplus heat in the non-Danish context, at least. So that is still a very large one. Then we also have surplus heat from smaller systems, smaller CHP systems based on gas engines and gas turbines. But they have actually been decreasing over the last few years because basically electricity prices are so low that they do not make economic incentives for using. What has happened instead is that things like electric boilers, solar heating and heat pumps, that is very much on the increase. And also waste heat. This is industrial waste heat as opposed to the one I showed before, which was waste heat from power generation. So industrial waste heat, that has been constant over a number of years, but now it's increasing because we are trying to focus even more on where are the options basically for surplus heat. And those were my words on the bigger picture of district heating and waste heat resources in district heating.
Thank you very much. We do have time for one question of clarification. If anyone has one question that is really just about any of the points that Paul made, not debate yet. If you don't have any questions, we can also just move on. But I'd have one question. If you add up the graphs that we saw now, what is the percentage of unconventional heat versus the old system?
It's still small. But if you compare waste heat, for instance, with the gas turbines and the gas engines from the smaller CHP, then it's actually bigger because they're basically being phased out by the logics of the electricity market and the other ones are coming in. So even gas turbines in big cities like, or Danish context, big cities like Viborg, they are being overtaken by waste heat resources because they are not economically attractive.
Great,
So,
and we'll be happy to hear later on in the session how what that looks like in practice. And now it's back to Kerstin Della as part of our double feature, and you will give us an insight into what the German government has up its sleeve to make this transition happen in Germany as well. Thank you.
Yes, maybe we can switch to the other slides. No? Okay. See. Yeah, perfect. Actually, as you have presented, we also see industrial waste heat utilization as an important decarbonization option in heat planning in our Energy Efficiency Act and in funding. And I will focus on what has happened since last year when we were talking about these issues. I will present what we did in regulatory law as concerning to the Heat Planning Act and also to the Energy Efficiency Act to promote the use of surplus heat. And also how our funding schemes are set up to promote this. When you showed your slides on the whole of Europe, we saw that Germany is complicated. It's not like there's one area where there's a lot of district heating. You can look to the east. There are many district heating systems. You have other parts in big cities in the west, but you have areas where there's primarily decentralized heating. So a general approach in Germany is difficult, which is why we are making heat planning mandatory for the states, the Länder, but also for the primarily for the municipalities. Municipalities with more than 100,000 inhabitants have to make heat planning until mid-26, and those below 100,000 inhabitants for up to from mid-28 on. And it's not prescribed by the federal government if there has to be decentralized heating or district heating. It's up to the municipalities. We do have standards for decentralized heating, how much renewable energy has to be used, the famous Gebäudeenergiegesetz. But in our Heat Planning Act, we also have requirements for district heating, minimum shares for renewables and waste heat for 2030 and 2030 and 2040 on a grid level and also on average for the whole country. These district heating transformation and expansion plans also become mandatory from then on. How are the municipalities supposed to do heat planning? First of all, as you did in kind of for the whole of Europe, an analysis of current status of municipal heat supply. Then a potential analysis for what is there, what renewable energy and waste heat in the planning area is there. And then the third step is a target scenario, including zoning of heat supply areas, which means it's either decentralized or it's district heating. And also showing a path towards how the targets are supposed to be reached. From this derived, municipalities are supposed to make action plans, meaning a roadmap with specific actions, how to achieve these the goals of minimum renewable energy and waste. More concrete or more specific, for the federal average, all district heating systems are supposed to reach at least 50% either of renewable energy or waste heat by 2030. And for each specific district heating system, it's supposed to be 30% by 2030 and 80% by 2040, every time either from renewable energies or waste heat. That is for existing district heating systems, so for transformation. For new district heating systems, there is supposed to be at least 65% heat either from renewable energies or from waste heat from 2025 on. That is, so it is in line with decentralized heating, and of course the overall target is climate neutrality by 2045, either district heating or decentralized heating. Waste heat, as I already said, is equated with heat from renewable energies, which is a strong incentive to district heating operators to get in touch with potential waste heat suppliers. I'm not talking about cogeneration, but industrial surplus heat, and to integrate waste heat in district heating. For the potential analysis, how much waste heat or surplus heat is there, we have some regulations in the Energy Efficiency Act, which helps to identify and leverage the potentials for surplus heat, especially for district heating. That's the second point I wanted to talk about. What is there on surplus heat in the Energy Efficiency Act? It's the first, actually this is the first legal framework to improve energy efficiency in Germany. It's in place since November 23. And it does have binding targets for both primary and final energy reduction in alignment with the European Energy Efficiency Directive. What are the key regulations of the Energy Efficiency Act? Energy efficiency targets, but also obligations for saving energy for federal and regional governments. The public sector has a role in energy savings. We make the implementation of environment management systems and energy management systems in businesses obligatory, and as for waste heat, there are requirements on energy efficiency and waste heat for data centers and also for the prevention and use of waste heat. This is something we looked at, especially after also being informed what you do in Denmark. For the data centers, it's pretty clear that the total energy consumption they will have will be growing in Germany. So a big question is, how do you use this, the surplus heat from data centers? And in the Energy Efficiency Act, we decided that data centers starting operation before July 2006 will have to meet minimum energy efficiency standards. There's not yet any mandatory regulation for heat usage, but from July 26 on, additionally to minimum efficiency standards for data centers, we also set mandatory waste heat usage targets of at least 10% in the beginning, and then moving up to 20% up in July 2028. Businesses with an energy consumption which is bigger than 2.5 gigawatt hours per year do have, on the one side, an obligation to avoid waste heat from production processes, and if this avoidance is not possible, then there's an obligation to use waste heat. So that the municipalities do know what surplus heat will be there. The companies are obliged to provide information to operators of district heating networks via public platforms for waste heat. And the aim is to bring market participants together, in particular to drive forward the necessary decarbonization of heat networks and remove obstacles caused by information deficits. We also will have Frau Fröhlich presenting this afternoon something which is called AVANET, which additionally to the platform I presented now, has the objective to bring together on the one side companies, and on the other side district heating operators to bring projects forward, and also to learn from projects which have already been put into place. As for the funding side, we do have on the one side the possibility, there's a little, to support projects from industry which want to, on the one side, reduce energy use, and on the other side, measures to extract waste heat and to connect this to district heating systems. The funding is, the funding amount is maximum 20 million euros per project. There are different modules which can be used, and we see a lot of waste heat projects, especially in the funding competition, because here we see that the funding amount ratio to CO2 savings is better than in other projects. Skip this. On the other hand, we do have a federal funding scheme for district heating networks called BEW, Bundesförderung für effiziente Wärmenetze, or federal funding for district heating networks. Here we do grant a funding on the one side for heat pumps or geothermal, heat storage, pipelines, and other district heating infrastructure, but also for the integration of waste heat. So either for the use of waste heat from industry, the company can go to the funding scheme for energy efficiency in industry, or it can go to the funding scheme for district heating networks and combine the two. Ideally, the two funding schemes can be combined. So what happened since last year, to sum up, is we do have two legal acts in place which are supposed to incentivize the use of waste heat in district heating networks. We also have two funding schemes in place. And we do have a platform to bring data together, and also we fund a kind of Kümmerer, I don't know what that is in English, a project who really tries to stimulate communication and the dialogue between the relevant actors. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerstin Della, also for making up time. Excellent. I see already there's one question for clarification from up here. Please. I think it's, you can just speak up like that, yeah.
Nico Vogler, 50 Hertz. I have one question regarding the platform for excess heat. On one of the slides it said that the target of the information are the district heat operators. Are those the sole targets? Is that exclusive, or is the information exclusive on the platform for the district heat operators, or is it also available for other actors?
It's supposed to be available for everyone, also for example, for municipalities or others.
Thank you.
Great. I'm afraid we'll have to save it for the podium. Thank you, Kerstin Della. And now we move on to Torkel Ingard from the Danish Energy Agency, heat specialist there. And we are going to hear a little bit more about how you help the potential that Paul outlined to become reality.
Yes. Am I going the right way? Yes, there you go. Yes, my name is Torkel Ingard, and as I was introduced as, I'm part of the Danish Energy Agency. My director, Tilde Helsten, should have been here today, so but she got sick, so you have to make do with me. But I'm not completely irrelevant. I'm the project lead on the Danish-German cooperation on district heating. And then I've also worked extensively on developing the Danish framework for waste heat usage in district heating. I'm going to start out talking a little bit about why we're here, what we do, both in Germany and the Danish Energy Agency. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about waste heat in the Danish context. So first of all, the Danish Energy Agency, we were born out of the oil crisis in the 1970s. When the first oil crisis hit, Denmark had a 90% reliance on foreign imported oil for energy consumption. So we were hit really hard and in a really bad place. In a lot of ways, in a similar place as Germany was when the Ukraine war hit. And a part of the Danish response was to start the Danish Energy Agency, and we were tasked with a lot of the same tasks that you guys are working with right now, transitioning the heating sector, increasing energy efficiency, and also just increasing energy independence. So stuff that you guys are also interested in, I gather, and we are lucky to have some do's and don'ts to share with you because we got started a bit early. As an agency, we're part of the Danish Ministry of Climate, Environment and Utilities. We're around 800 employees working with all areas of the energy sector. We do a lot of different work. But all of it is under a clear political mandate that we have to support the transition of the energy system to reach the 70% CO2 reduction target in 2030 and climate neutrality in 2045. We do this in a lot of ways. We help support new policy development. We also draft legislation in the energy area. We administer funding for research and subsidies in energy, etc. And basically, we're a key actor in the Danish transition. And that's our national work. We also have a global cooperation department where we come from, me and my colleagues here today. We have 24 partner countries that we work bilaterally with all over the world on a lot of different topics. For district heating and for energy efficiency, which are the topics for waste heat utilization, we have 13 countries that we work with. Some of them are only energy efficiency, some of them are only district heating, and some of them, like Germany, we do both. We've had a cooperation with Germany since 2015, working on district heating and energy efficiency. We started with Baden-Württemberg and then in Hessen and North Rhine-Westphalia, and since 2022 we've had a formal collaboration also with the federal government, with BMWK. I think I can easily say that Germany is one of our best cooperations. It's a very active bilateral exchange, and there's a lot we can learn from each other, and just a nice exchange. And I think we share a lot of similar issues, especially with the war in Ukraine, that it's become incredibly apparent that we need to actually work together on these topics. And then on to the topic of today, waste heat. Waste heat is something that we work actively on in Denmark, both as part of our regulation on district heating and energy efficiency. And it's also because of this, it plays an important part of the new Danish roadmap and strategy for energy efficiency. And it's an important part of this roadmap. This was just published by the Ministry of Climate, Environment and Utilities just recently. And waste heat is an important step in the coming work of the Parliament in the coming years. This roadmap and strategy is supposed to be both a roadmap for how we work with our implementation of the new energy efficiency and building directives, but it's also just a new strategy for how we work with energy efficiency. And while historically energy efficiency has been very much focused on direct energy reductions, this new strategy is supposed to make a more broader and more holistic focus on seeing energy efficiency as more in the system context. So instead of only looking at direct reductions of energy consumptions, we should also consider what type of energy is being used, when is it best to use this energy, where is it best to use this energy, and also, of course, still maintaining a focus that we shouldn't use energy if we can avoid it. And waste heat plays an important part of this for both energy efficiency, because it's a energy reduction potential in the industry especially, but also for district heating, because district heating or waste heat utilization is a proven way of doing sector integration. It's a great way to replace fossil-based fuels in the district heating production, and it can also just provide a lot of benefits to the way you operate your district heating system. So it's something we discuss a lot in Denmark, and it's something we'd also like to discuss with you guys here in Germany. And then on to what waste heat is in Denmark at the moment right now. Waste heat is a part of the portfolio we see as the fuels we are transitioning into. In Denmark, we are quite far in our energy transition in the heating sector. We have around 75% renewables and electric production in our district heating production today. And then we have around a little bit more percent waste heat production in our district heating. In 2022, when we did the last inventory of our waste heat utilization, We had around 64 waste heat producers delivering to 39 networks in Denmark, 39 out of 400 networks. It's mostly a few large producers producing the vast majority of the heating production. So in Denmark, it's the 10 largest producers of waste heat deliver around 80% of the total amount of waste heat. And we do mainly see that it's direct waste heat. 83% of the waste heat utilized is directly into the system without being lifted with a heat pump. And the last 17% is using a heat pump to feed into the system. We have usually it's where the waste heat is part of the production portfolio in the system, but we also have some areas where it's almost entirely waste heat production. It can be up to 80 or 90% waste heat, but in those cases they always maintain their backup capacity, so as they are reliant on this external producer. Let's see. And just apart from being a transition fuel, waste heat is also just a very good fuel to have in your system as a district heating company. It can provide a base load, which is often being replaced here when the CHPs have less operating hours nowadays. But it is it's not always the right solution to base your production on. It is very context specific. You need to make a very good assessment of whether or not it makes sense to your system, how much risk you're able to open yourself up to. Like you are making yourself, as a district heating company, you are making yourself reliant on an external producer that may have different priorities, different production times compared to you, and also the risk that they might close down or reduce production, which will impact your production. So waste heat is also just, in general, it's difficult. And in Denmark, we have a lot of tradition of doing a lot of regulation around district heating. And we also do this in waste heat. And we are quite active in it. And it's very difficult for us because you have to balance a lot of sometimes conflicting interests. You have to maintain a good incentive for new waste heat producers to actually establish new projects. But at the same time, you have to also balance that with doing consumer protection, both in terms of prices, but also making sure that there's not being taken too great risks. But that is something we work with a lot in Denmark. And we keep trying to improve, which is also why it's a part of our new strategy. Whoops, I think I might have shut it off. Okay, I'll just get started while it turns on. There we are. In the future, waste heat is going to play a bigger role in the Danish district heating production. But it's very hard to say how much it's going to expand. The Danish forecast on the topic is relatively conservative. And that's due to a lot of reasons. Every year we do a big climate projection where we do a frozen policy projection into the future, in part to see if we reach our climate goals and if we should make any adjustments. And as part of this, we of course also forecast developments in waste heat. And we do see, while we don't have a huge expansion of waste heat in the future, we do see some trends. First of all is that the traditional industrial direct waste heat from large industrial areas, we don't expect it to increase dramatically. That's not to say that there's no potential. It's just that we don't have anything, tendencies pointing toward that there'll be new projects in the near future. But we do see a trend for an increase in the utilization for large electricity consumers, such as PGX and data centers, as Paul mentioned. And that is especially what we see here in the very top blue part, that waste heat from heat pumps from these sources are expected to increase. But how much is going to be very difficult. And then there's also some aspects that are not taken into account in these projections. We also see the new energy efficiency directives, which requires utilization of waste heat from data centers and also from other industrial energy consumers. we can also expect that these new changes will, of course, also impact the development. But how much relies on a lot of factors and also the transposition into Danish law. I think it's interesting to point out something about this, and that is the new Energy Efficiency Directive. It requires data centers with an energy consumption of around 1 megawatt or capacity of consumption, but industrial consumers has to be around 8 megawatts before they do a cost-benefit analysis. And while, of course, there's a big potential in data centers, I think it's important not to neglect the traditional waste heat sources, because they are often very valuable for a district heating producer network, and often maybe easier to incorporate into your system. And then before I sign off for this, I'd also just like to add that you might, if you know this graph, be able to see it here, but Denmark is on track to, at least for district heating, to reach our climate goals in 2030. In 2030, we expect to be almost like climate neutral in the district heating production, with a little bit of leftover fossil production in our peak and reserve load, and in our waste to energy incineration. So while we try to increase the use of waste heat, it doesn't directly impact whether or not we will reach our climate goals, because we'll reach them even no matter what. But while it doesn't change that the reaching of our goals, the waste heat still provides a benefit, because it can help increase the energy efficiency of the energy system in its entirety, but also because it can help displace some of the other district heating production fuels that, while is better than coal, for example, it might still be a good idea to try to displace some of the biomass consumption in the district heating system. And there, waste heat will also play a role. So it is part of our future work, a lot of our future work. It's been a very busy policy area for the last 10 years, and it looks to be going that way in the future as well. And I think that I'll keep it from here. So thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free.
Any clarification questions for Toge? Then maybe I would just have one regarding this graph, because we see the amount of district heating produced going up.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Energy Efficiency Directive and so on. Is this a function of the grid expanding and you just reaching more and more customers in an already well-developed heat grid environment, or is the consumption just not going down in this model?
It's a combination of factors. I think a little bit is the expansion, but there's also that, like, even though we are increasing energy efficiency in a lot of parameters, there is still a lot of it is difficult to check down, and people are building bigger homes and having more comfort, are getting used to more comfort. But I think that's probably something I should say for some of the building energy efficiency experts that we also have here today.
A lot to discuss on that front. Why don't you three come together? Grab yourself a water if you like, or let me just hand you one here. And I'll just ask like one question or so to each of them, and then you guys can jump in. We have to say that Kerstin Della has to leave after this session, so if you want to ask her any questions, don't wait for the coffee break, do it now. You can already. Sorry about that.
My colleagues are here. So.
Okay, your colleagues are here. Can they already identify themselves? Where are they? For later on? Here. Okay. Excellent. Paul, let me start with you. You showed us the massive amounts of waste heat that are there and that could be used. And you said even in your hometown, it could be up to 50% could cover it. What are the crucial points where you'd say, okay, we need to work on this and this and this in order for that to actually happen?
Yes, this is turned on. One of the crucial points, that is how you actually share the cost of doing this. Danish district heating, that is a non-profit organization, meaning if you make a profit, then you have to repay it to the customers the next year. So you're not reaping any benefits in the company, basically. Secondly, they are not allowed to pay the industrial consumers or providers of district heating. They're not allowed to pay them so much that they can actually make a profit of it. So they have to do it out of a sense of social well-being, or sense of communal
Responsibility.
responsibility. That's the word. Yes. So you have to convince them to do it, and that can be an issue because they're not allowed to make a benefit. But many industries, they will do it nonetheless. But they are, of course, able to cover the investment cost that they have, with a small margin, but not very much. I think you've actually introduced from the Energy Agency a maximum price for how much they're allowed to pay. So there are something in the regulation, and I was visiting a district heating company a few weeks ago with my students, and they mentioned a local company that they have been communicating with for 10 years about whether they could actually get district heating from them. And the company said, yeah, but we don't know if we will still be producing it in 10 years, and then we will simply have made an investment without any benefit. And they've been saying that for 10 years, and the repayment would have been like 2 years for them. So there's something about the uncertainty and actually getting people motivated to engage. But I should also say that, like in Aalborg, we have a cement factory, and they're pretty motivated because either they have two options: either they buy some unit to cool the cement kilns in the fjord, or they buy a unit to feed it into the district heating grid. So it's either one or the other. So
And they're not going anywhere.
well, that depends on the government. Whenever the government starts mentioning CO2 taxes or taxes, then they say, oh, we might be moving out, and then, yeah.
Cement maybe not being as mobile as some other industries.
No.
Casindela, you mentioned the extensive framework that has now been put in place, especially also for both identifying where the heat sources are, which I think companies have to register by the end of this year, roundabout. And at the same time, the municipalities are now beginning with their heat planning processes. Some have already started, and so on. Some they have until 2028, right? How do you get the information for the heat register and so on? How do we make sure that this actually gets used in the municipal heat planning and that we don't create silos of information? How do we make sure that this gets integrated into each municipality's heat plan?
Well, let's say our job as federal government is to have actually 3 different registers in place, and to assure that the data which has to be put in these registers, sorry for that, is the data the municipalities and also the district heating operators do need to do their heat planning. In the end, it's not us who will aggregate the data, because it would not be, that wouldn't make sense in a country like Germany. It's basically up to the municipalities to use these data centers, and in some länder, for example, North Rhine-Westphalia, the land also will additionally help with studies for the whole country, for the whole, land, for interregional planning. But it's not like the data goes to the federal government and then goes back into the municipalities again, but can be used by the municipalities. We could have imagined to have more demand for data. The municipalities and also the district heating operators need, but there are also data protection regulations which we can't ignore. and also a big political debate about how much data does the state need, which in the end led to a reduction of the information which is necessary to be put into the registers.
So we'll have to see what municipalities make of it, and maybe...
Yes, but they do have an obligation to make a heating plan, and they do need data, so where will they look for the data? In these registers, if there is not already an information system in place, which, for example, in some länder is already the place, for example, in Bayern, who has been very critical on municipal heat planning, they do have already Länder regulations in place, that data on renewable energies, but also on surplus heat has to be provided.
Toge, the regulation is the word here. You mentioned you had a wonderful phrase about the Danish tradition of intense regulation of different industries. If you look at what you've seen now in Germany, what has been put in place in the last year, let's put it that way, and compare it to how you deal with the issue also of waste heat integration and so on in Denmark. Of course, our district heating providers aren't necessarily non-profits. That's definitely a difference. But if you look at it, like, where do you see the differences and similarities, and do you think that what we have here will get us to where we need to be?
That the last part is the very difficult part. Whether or not you'll get us.
I'll let you fudge that one.
No, but I
Diplomatically.
think this last couple of years in Germany, like, has really. It seems like Germany has established like a legal package around the heat transition, and you can always argue about whether or not it's enough or whether or not it's too much. But I think just the fact that you have built like a basis level regulatory system brings it a very large step forward. And I think especially heat planning, both in terms of just transitioning the heating sector in general, establishing more district heating, but also as a way of identifying and maybe supporting waste heat utilization. That is a very important step in trying to further your transition. And then I guess it's up to Germany how much you want to expand your regulatory system. In Denmark, I think at least Denmark, you can say that Denmark is a good example that more regulation can actually help create a system where people are developing their operations. Like, even though we have a very like comprehensive set of regulation around district heating, it has supported the growth of a sector that is both very expansive, but also, like, as I showed earlier, like, we have come quite far in our transition of the district heating. And that is because we have a very like comprehensive set of regulation. But whether or not Germany wants to do the same thing, that's very much up to you guys. I won't interfere.
Actually, when we started to look into the Danish case study, let's say, it was obvious that you can't just do copy-paste because the systems are different. We are not regulated in the district heating sector. We're still we are working on a basis where you do have private contracts, and around these private contracts you do have a regulation how to do the private contracts, which is called AVB Fernwärmeverordnung. As everybody knows here in the room who's speaking German, and I don't have a good translation for it in English. And we're going to do eine Novelle on this, but we will not change the system completely. So we look at the Danish example. Before we were talking, we also learned something about CO2 prices. We do have a regulation on CO2 prices and a trading system in Germany, which will lead up to the ETS2 on the EU level. We also try to learn on how companies from the district heat side and from the industry side can make contracts. I remember last year that there was the example of this contract where all the benefit goes to the heat-giving company for the first 2 years, then it is shared for 2 years, and then basically the benefits go to the municipality completely. That is something where we can learn from, but it will not be just copy-paste of the system. It's not working, not from the regulatory framework in Germany, but also not if you look into how the district heating systems are gespeist. You do have a lot of biomass. You do have a lot of electricity, like from nearshore wind. The situation in Germany is just very different.
Let me open the floor for questions. I would say we take a couple of minutes off your coffee break to make this possible. So it's up to you to keep the questions short. Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Martin Bochert, Kelvin Green. We support and consult a lot of district heating operators currently on the green heat transition and the district heating transition, and also in case or in terms of the business case. And you mentioned that is that one of the big advantages why people in Denmark love district heating is the cost, because it's so much cheaper. And I would like to learn, I understand that the cost disadvantage of district heating for the very expensive pipes comes from the free waste heat, also in many German cases, from producing electricity, and you have very cheap heat going aside, and then it balances. But if you switch to a green system with heat pumps, etc., then you have an additional cost factor. How do you solve that? We have currently a very good funding system, which is very good and which needs to be continued and extended very much, but still sometimes very difficult to find a business case and to keep the heat very cheap so that people love it actually. I think
maybe let us just quickly collect the questions, and we go to our next question, and we'll just collect them all.
HEFW, you already mentioned that one of the main obstacles for using waste heat is the risk that the waste heat source goes out of business. And I was actually hoping to learn how Denmark solves this problem. But maybe then the other question is, I remember that during a presentation about a similar scheme to tackle a similar risk in geothermal power plants, there was an idea floating around that such a system could be integrated into not a funding system but into a financing system. So maybe the question is, how is that getting along, this the idea of integrating it, and is there maybe already a timetable for this?
Thank you. 2 questions. One was specifically directed at you.
And I think the other one was maybe
yeah.
also. Starting with the first one about the general feasibility. So you have some scale effects. So some of the technologies, they're basically cheaper the bigger size. If you take a heat storage, for instance, which has a very large value in Danish district heating system, because it basically enables you to either produce electricity or consume electricity depending on the spot market prices. That is 1,000 times more expensive per unit of measure if you have it on a household scale than if you have it for a district heating system. So that makes a tremendous difference. Secondly, with the district heating system, it's not just a matter of having one technology. It's a matter of having a plethora of technologies. If you take, I was just looking at a plant yesterday, so they have an electric boiler, they have an electric heat pump, they get waste heat from a nearby fish factory, this is Skagen, Denmark. They get from a waste incineration plant, they get biogas, or they get from a biogas engine running on the sewage treatment plant. So they have so many different technologies, and they are optimizing against the electricity market. And it's not just the day-ahead electricity market, they're also working on the regulating reserves, for instance. And they have so many possibilities of making money. Like when they built their electric boiler, they were the first ones in Denmark to have an electric boiler at a district heating station. I think it was repaid within months because they used it so much to provide regulating reserves. And Yes, so you clearly have some options which will counterbalance the cost of the pipes. I'm not saying it works everywhere, but the more ingenious ones, they are doing great, I would say.
Can I add just a little bit to that?
Yes.
If you're done. It's just that, yeah, you mentioned also that the regulation in Denmark is then responsible for making sure that those like cost savings go into the consumers. And that is of course true, but I think every company, if you are able to do a cost reduction, there's a question of whether or not it will benefit your consumers or not. And you always, nowadays, when you have a heat pump as a competing product, you always have a risk of actually losing some of your customers. And I think in regards to the optimization that a district heating company is able to do, in Denmark, before the energy crisis, you could see district heating, a natural gas boiler, and a heat pump for a standard house in Denmark was approximately the same. At the height of the energy crisis, the price of natural gas production of a natural gas supplied house was doubled. For a heat pump, it was around 50% more, and for district heating, it was around the same pre-crisis level, the cost for a standard consumer in a house. So I think there's, even if it doesn't like, even if there can be some problems for like the cost savings actually going into consumer lower prices, there is a real cost benefit in doing an optimized district heating system.
We're having a slightly different discussion in Germany.
Yeah, maybe part of the question was for me too, as for the risk-reducing assurance scheme for waste heat. Yes, we're looking into that for geothermal, and we are we went many steps. Now the last step, we talked to KfW and also to assurance companies, Rückversicherer, how to calculate the risk. We see how it could work. We also have an idea how the costs could be shared between different ministries. The last step is finding money in the actual budget discussion, which is not too easy. As for waste heat, we're not there yet because, well, one thing is people have to concentrate on one thing first. The other is, as far as I understand, the risk calculation for waste heat is a lot more complicated than for geothermal. And I'm not even able to promise we can find a way how to work with this, much less give you a timetable when we will finish it.
Just one thing about the uncertainty for the waste heat providers. Of course, there's an uncertainty, but typically they will repay it within a few years, the investment they've had. So it's not as if they are, even though they're of course committing themselves to providing waste heat, the actual investment they made is repaid within a few years. So even if they go out of business after 3 years, it's not really a big problem. Secondly, some of them, they will actually use the district heating provision as a part of their green image, basically. So if you are Google or Facebook or something, and you can document that you're supplying district heating to provide heating for houses, then you will go out and say, look what we're doing. We're doing something good for the society. We are green. We're using wind power and we're providing district heating. We are a green company, basically. So they will use that in their own PR, basically.
And I think we will hear a little bit about projects where that worked in the next session from a project we fund who are trying to put examples together and show how it can work in the German system. And when I pointed to the people who will stay here from the ministry, they have there's company now. Ute Hörmann is head of the unit who is responsible for the funding scheme for Bundesförderung effiziente Wärmenetze, the district heating. And also Ron Lipka, who is responsible for the energy efficiency issues. So,
excellent. And I think now, in the interest of time, we have to relocate all other debates to the coffee break. As you mentioned, Kerstin Diller, we will have plenty of opportunities to discuss specific projects and the business models behind them, as well as some of the more local and regional strategic initiatives, and how that all works in practice. Thank you very much for the bird's eye overview and for the discussion. The applause is yours. And we will reconvene here around 3:45, please. Somebody lose stylish glasses, stylish sunglasses. Anyone? 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 No, no, no. We'll keep them here for now. Okay, Billy, shall we start? Are all the speakers here? Let me just count the ways. All the speakers here, all the speakers here. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of our program. Now we take a deep dive into real-life projects and real-life initiatives at the regional and local level. We're going to look at best practices as well as strategic concerns. And before I ask the first speaker onto the stage, the idea is that we will have no panel at the end. You have a total of 20 minutes per presentation. If you finish after 20 minutes, there's no time for Q&A. We have to go to the next speaker. If you finish after 15 minutes, there is time for Q&A. So ideally, if you could finish a few minutes before, that would be great. Then we stick to the time frame and have time for discussion. Otherwise, mention it again, plenty of time to have also bilateral talks during the reception at the end. First up is Ellen Pilgaard Jensen from Project Zero in Sønderborg. And you are running a PPP project that aims to have Sønderborg be climate neutral by 2029. And the embassy was kind enough to write down for me that you are the program head for the master plan.
Genau.
So that means you're the mastermind. More or less. More or less. I've been told to.
At least I try to manage the project. There are a lot of stakeholders. That is my whole point of this presentation: how to manage that. And thank you for the invitation.
Excellent. I've been this morning. I was told, for those who hadn't been there yet, I was told to manage the mix between Danish humility and German hyperbole. And so the stage is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for the invitation to this important dialogue on surplus heat. My name is Allan Pilgaard Jensen, and I am heading the master plan, as we call it, for a carbon neutral energy system in 2029. We are a capital, a municipality of 75,000 inhabitants in Sønderborg, and Sønderborg is situated, located close to the German border, and I'm happy here to share the learnings that we have had for quite many years actually. This initiative started up back in 2007 as a public-private partnership, as mentioned. My main message today is that partnerships are absolutely key in order to utilize the huge potential of excess heat that we heard about in the earlier presentations. And there are certainly barriers. We also heard about that, and I would also like to touch upon these barriers and how you could address at least some of them. Yep. Public-private partnership since 2007, and our very keen focus is on energy efficiency first. That is really what's important for us. And we see, of course, excess heat as an important part of this energy efficiency journey. The partnership here Project Zero Partnership is what we call a lighthouse project in Sonderborg. That means that it's a long-term project that has focus on a long-term basis, and as I mentioned, it started up in 2007 with the municipality and also private funding. And I would say it's really about partnering, not just the partners within the core partnership, but with all the stakeholders that we have in our system. And that is what I will like to elaborate a little bit on. We see actually this journey as you could say a simple model. We have 3 elements here, to put it simple. It's important when you have such a partnership here that you have a joint aspiration, that you have a bold aspiration that you work on together, and that you have local support for this. And I think this local support is extremely important in excess heat projects. Then we develop a cost-effective master plan, and this master plan involves a lot of stakeholders across the energy system. We have the energy system with buildings, with transport, with businesses, and energy production, and we try to, handle that all together. And then we need to organize the action and follow up closely in order to be able to actually reach our goals. If you look at the local action here and the local engagement, the bold aspiration is about, we had 700,000 tons of CO2 in 2007, and we aim at neutrality in 2029 in the energy system. Then we have a lot of stakeholders here, as you see. The city of Sonderborg, the city council, has supported this all the way, you could say, since 2007. And when you look into utilization of excess heat, of course, the utilities or the district heating companies and the industries here, and also the municipality, are really key stakeholders. We have 3 district heating companies in small Sonderborg municipality of 75,000 people. One covering the northern part, the major district heating company covering the Sonderborg city and also part here, and then we have a small district heating company down here as well. And you see this is a very schematic drawing of the district heating system, and you see the dots here, that's where the system is not connected. And it is extremely important that you actually work together across these partners to connect them in order to utilize the excess heat. The second part is about making a cost-effective master planning, and we are very focused on energy efficiency first, as I mentioned, reduce as much as possible so that you don't need to produce more renewables than absolutely necessary. The second one is to reuse the energy, and that is to a very large extent all about excess heat, utilization of excess heat from industry, supermarkets, PTX, and also data centers in the area. And as I mentioned, in order to realize this, we have to connect the networks. When it comes to renewables, we are having green gas by 2 biogas plants. Green fuel is being planned with Powertex, where there is a lot of excess heat, of course, and then PV and wind, of course. Organizing logging action is about all about, you could say, Project Zero. The Project Zero team is the project management office of this organization. So we manage the whole project and have around 75 people organized in what we call hotspots. I mentioned these sectors here that we have in our project, and we then have a hotspot in each of these. Here we have put out district heating here as an example, of course, where we work closely together in order to reach climate neutrality and also utilizing the excess heat. So the project management office organizes, facilitates, and drives the motivation with all the stakeholders here in this system. Then we have, of course, also the municipality as an important part in the system. Here you see the CEO of the the biggest district heating company, the Sonderborg Heating Company, and he is taking the ownership of what district heating should do in our overall plan. In our plan, about 40,000 tons of CO2 was still in the district heating system, and that should be down to zero. It should be neutral in 2029, and on top of that, we need to utilize as much as excess heat as possible in the system, and we have actually a target of reaching 40% of utilization. Then the other district heating companies, the two other are part of this group, together with the municipality. Danfoss is involved with their expertise, and then a manager also from Project Zero is involved. And when you sit together in these hotspots, then you can actually plan. And we also heard from the other presenters that this is really about local planning, because you need to utilize the heat, the excess heat, locally. And if you don't sit together here in this in these groups, then you will not be able to do it. So this is really about partnerships locally. As I mentioned, we aim at being able to cover up to 40% of the heat demand in our district heating system with excess heat by use from supermarkets, data centers, industries, and power trades. And of course, district heating is essential in order to be able to do this together with all the other, you could say, benefits you have with district heating. We heard also earlier today, how you can utilize renewables, integrate use renewables, how you can use district heating system as an energy storage. And supply security is also very important. You have many different, you could say, sources of energy, and that means that you have supply security. Also, price-wise, it is very important. You know the untapped source here that we can actually cover all of Europe with waste heat. But, you know, the question is then how to do that, and whether you can utilize it all. And I would like to go a little bit deeper into that, because that is not always possible. When you look at this one, then I have shown this because when delegations visit Sonderborg, then this supermarket attracts very big attention. Because it's very simple to explain how you can utilize excess heat. It utilizes, of course, the heat from freezers and cooling displays, and it can cover 78% of the heat demand in the supermarket. And that's actually quite something, I would say. Then on top of that, you can actually sell the heat to the local district heating companies and supply also local homes and industries in the nearby. It's a small and simple solution, and it can be replicated to all over the world, I would say. And as far as I've heard, there are around 30,000 supermarkets in Germany similar to this one, so there is quite a potential. The reason also I find this example very good is the fact that it uses so much of its own energy, these 75%, but because it actually also means that you can actually use your energy even though the excess energy, even though you are not connected to the grid. There's a big potential just to utilize it in your own, you could say, company. I think that's, as I mentioned, a good example. But you would maybe comment that supermarkets have limited amounts of excess heat because, as you also know, in the summertime, that's where we have low heat demand, and that's actually where the supermarket can supply. So it's only a little fraction of the heat that they can actually supply to a district heating system. So when it comes to other, bigger enterprises and bigger, you could say, sources of energy, they can only use a fraction of their own energy themselves, and they have a lot to sell to the district heating company. So that's, of course, also a very interesting source. But here you have the issue that has also been touched upon earlier, than this is not the core business of these companies. So they are not so much into excess heat, and it's when they look into the business case, they have a 3-year payback time. That's standard, and then they look at this compared to other investments that they have in their portfolio. And it's not always the district heating excess heat, you could say, business case that is the most interesting one. So what do they do? And that's actually where you need to look into new partnerships and look into how can you overcome these barriers. And a direction we are looking into, our district heating company is looking into, is actually that they try to look at a distributed investment plan. So traditionally, district heating companies, they have centralized production, but they need to look into more distributed investments in order to, you could say, to make this happen. And that means, of course, that the companies, the district heating companies, should have this overall target of getting to neutrality and also minimizing the energy consumption. And that's what we have as our ambition in our master plan. So you need to have you could say, the actors together and have a joint aspiration, a joint target. And then, of course, it has to be a good business case for everybody in the end. Then if a district heating company should go into this kind of deal, then of course they need a certain, you could say, security that they actually get the supply. So our district heating company actually looks into a minimum of 10 years contracts to make sure that they get the return. And then you can look into sharing the benefit after 10 years time. You can start sharing the benefit with the supplier, the heat supplier from the industrial company. Then, of course, there is a risk of if for one or another reason you cannot supply anymore from this company. And there you can also look into new models about mobile solutions, because, of course, to a certain extent, the industrial company needs to make their own investment internally in order to be able to supply. But the big investment on the heat pump is actually something that the district heating company can take care of. And if you also make a mobile solution, then you can actually also utilize it afterwards, if that should happen. So that's a way to tackle that. If you look at the energy mix on the second part here, you also need to think into to partnership. As I mentioned, we plan to cover up to 40% of our energy mix with waste heat. And actually, when we analyze the potential, the whole potential gigawatt hours potential, it's more or less about 80%. But of course, we heard about the heat curve earlier. Of course, we cannot utilize it all year. So you need to also look into how you can make your consumption or your demand higher during the whole year. And there it makes sense also to start looking into supplying more district heating to industrial companies, because traditionally, at least in Sonderborg, we have looked into homes, how to supply homes. But there's a big potential for production processes also, where the temperatures are high enough for a certain part of the production, and then you can use other sources like high temperature heat pumps or biogas for the higher ones. So that's also a way to look into that. And when you look into the whole system in Sonderborg, we also, you could say, organize this together in our master plan and our hotspot planning in order to make sure that we select the most profitable projects. Because if you don't coordinate this, you can actually come into a situation where you use some of the project, you utilize some of the projects that are not the most profitable ones. So you need this cooperation locally in order to realize these projects. That is actually my main point. And I've seen that I've less than 1 minute left, so I better stop now. I would maybe stop with the invitation for you to go to Sonderborg and see how we work with this if you are interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen. We'll have one question though from anybody from the audience, because I think this was a super interesting case study. Rüdiger.
I love that case.
Actually, I've been asked to maybe provide this because the people on the internet cannot hear you. If you bring up here.
This is Rüdiger. I'm representing the Energy Service Hub in Germany. So one question, when you look at the activities of the utility and the industry, so connecting those two together, and you mentioned payback times and stuff, have you any thoughts on, or had you anything designed on for the case that the company is not existing anymore after 2, 3, 4 years? Or is that something which went quite well because you have a mix of different energies, like we heard before from the Danish Energy Agency, or from our colleague from Aalborg, sorry?
We don't have examples of that yet, but we are very keen on, now I'm talking on behalf of the district heating company, because of course you have the direct contract between the district heating company and the industrial company. But you need to have clauses within that contract that make sure that you actually get your heat and there on a 10 years basis. And of course there is always a risk, and you need to take care of that risk. And therefore I also take this mobile solution into consideration. And then you need to find out how to share that specific risk. So that's my point.
Super interesting. Thank you, Ellen, and also for reminding us that waste heat usage doesn't always mean feeding it into the grid.
Exactly.
It can also mean that this discussion that you're having with all these different waste heat suppliers means that maybe they think about how they could use it better, and what that means for the discussions that you're having about grid usage is something that we can gladly discuss afterwards with you and others. Thank you again, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd now like to ask to come to the front Christian Paul. He is a business developer for heat with Badenova, a regional utility in the beautiful south of Germany, in Freiburg. And you have done, amongst other things, a project that you're presenting us today with a dairy, plant, and we'd be very interested to know, from the regional perspective, go even deeper into a specific project and what the business model there looks like. Thank you, Christian.
Thanks a lot for having us, or me here, to talk about it. And I take the challenge of trying to stay in time, because as we know, it's a topic where we can talk a lot about, and a lot of topics which we scratch on site. So I'm really interested in having feedback later on. Feel free to, because it's just one step what we're doing here. There are lots of more ideas everybody can contribute to. And also, forgive me, you see the slides are in German. I simply didn't have the time to translate them. I hope it's okay, but don't worry, I'm speaking in English all the time. But actually, I had the focus on this presentation on waste heat as one critical or important element on the way to decarbonization, and especially from our main headquarter town, which is Freiburg in South Germany. And just so you already kind of know, southeast, we are heading on the border of France and Swiss. And Badenova is actually a typical utility, not owned by one municipal, but owned by over 100 municipal or cities of that region. And this is the area where we are acting, especially with the task which these municipal stakeholders gave us to be a major role in the transformation of our energy system to decarbonization. And we are also, in that sense, having three main companies or three main tasks or where we are located at, and one of it is the Badenova Netze, which is a simply operator of the electricity and natural gas grids in that region. The other one, Badenova Energie, is the one who is selling natural gas and the electricity, and I'm part of Badenova Wärme Plus, who is the operator, constructor, and owner of every producing or energy producing plant, either electricity or heat. So we are owning windmills, we are owning PV, we are owning, of course, district heating systems, and this is what actually is within that part at the moment the biggest part. Anyhow, we're having 250 plants in total overall, from medium size or small size to little bigger size, but you always, in order to understand, for example, Freiburg as the biggest city in our area, with 230,000 people, is nothing as big as Hamburg, Berlin, or whatever. So we are always talking about a little smaller scale than that might be here the case. And because of this, that we are trying to be a major player in this kind of transition, we within the Badenova Wärme Plus have 4 major strategic goals, which we set up lately. And to start with one of it, of course, to increase our own wind and PV production. So actually we are heading towards the goal of having 1 gigawatt installed by 2035, mainly in our region, but at this point we can find out that that it might be necessary to also build these plants outside of our region and to operate them then. And what is also important is that we also want to take our knowledge and bring it to the industry in our region and to help them to get on a pathway to decarbonization, to transformation. And therefore we are trying to consult them with what we see, which is our understanding as an energy supplier. And because basically, there are these simple rules which we already heard. First step is reduce energy. Second is reduce it within your own facilities. And then at third, you can think about if something is still left to provide waste heat to somebody else outside of your own company. And so there are a lot of different things. But main thing, and this is what we are actually heading for, is that we want to and have to increase our district heating network and give there more availability to district heating, because at this point most of our region is like 100% natural gas supplied for heating, and there are only small district heating systems which might, because of a new build district or whatever, grown up in the last years. But there wasn't any specific goal to go into the district heating for this complete, for the big cities at that point. Anyhow, you might see it, all these goals lead to an increase of factor 4 to 10, depending where you are. This, of course, means something that we as a company have to change. We already doubled our employees in this sector. We will increase more and more. So the fourth strategic goal is to rethink our organization, to transform it to more self-organization, so more people having more responsibility, and of course we need to get more into digitalization at that point. But another topic we could talk about, but shouldn't do it now. For district heating, of course, we are always having these district heating of the fourth generation as one of our most important begriff or idea, which of course is well known, but to have the same understanding for everybody, just to make sure what is the fourth generation. Of course, high percentage of renewable or carbon neutral energy. And of course, in order to be able to utilize this energy, you need to have a low supply temperature in the network, because in general, renewable energy is also only available at low temperatures, and so you try to reduce the effort to make it available or to utilize it. This, of course, leads to less heat losses in the system, but the main consequence of it is, if you use a lot of renewable energies, you're not having this one big power plant supplying the whole city anymore, simply because the renewable energy is not everywhere available. You have groundwater at that side of the city, you might have biomass on the other side, you might have waste heat in the south. So at the end, you need a district heating network which has a lot of different energy suppliers at different places. And this can only work if you have a smart network. So you need to have a lot of digitalization in order always to follow demand by the supply with the lowest cost and the highest renewable energy amount in it. And if you have a smart network, you can also go to, I actually didn't find the English word, Sektorenkopplung. So basically what we already heard today, and that you, whenever it is possible, get more synergies with the electricity sector. If there is enough renewable energy in it, or enough renewable electricity, you use it to produce renewable heat instead of wasting it, for example, with power to heat. Or on the other side, if you have your combustion engines, cogeneration units, you can stabilize the electricity market at that sense. Anyhow, the district heating systems always only make sense where you have a high energy density, where you can actually utilize or are allowed to use all the effort, all the money it takes to dig in all these big pipes and so on. So it's always something for a rather city type and not a village at that point. That's why we go into a look on Freiburg, and this map, actually the main map, is something which came out of the municipal heat planning of Freiburg, and even if the Danish people might start laughing about it, Freiburg started in 2019 and was kind of the first mover in Germany. But it was very important, and it is something which we are also at this point in order to just show how we try to make up all the time we lost in the last decades not doing it, but it's still a huge, huge challenge to bring it back. So, because we, of course, have that goal to make Freiburg to a district heating city. At this point, we only have less than 20% of the city covered, but by 2035, we want to have 50% covered. And then, secondly, these 50% of cars needs to be 100% carbon neutral. And to give you a little example what that means, Freiburg being like 7 times as small as the city of Hamburg. The city of Hamburg, we understand the colleagues planning with 8 kilometers of building new heating pipes a year. We are planning 10 to 12 a year, simply because we don't have that heating network in the city yet. And so, of course, we can't do everything once at a time. We are actually heading towards picking up, these are the yellow lines you see, special Wärmeverbünde, we call it, projects where we start, and we started with the first in 2020, where I'm getting to the diary, the Schwarzwaldmilch, and also continued to build the second one, Freiburg West, in last year, and we actually would need to go for it for 3 more in order to achieve the goals. Anyhow, we're trying to have 1 Wärmeverbund in 2035. Just another map to give you a little example why we are heading for the Schwarzwaldmilch. We're having this district heating of the 4th generation. You see it, we have several kind of heating source with heating pumps of ambient heating pumps, biomass, we have groundwater, we have, of course, natural gas, peak suppliers in different places, but the dairy, Schwarzwaldmilch, just producing dairy products, milk and so on, is located like basically in the middle of the town, and you already might see it. The green dots is the existing network, so it's close by, and so we were able to really utilize the low temperature heat at this dairy. Simply what is available at this spot, and this is something I think is important, that low temperature waste heat is also very useful and very good for such a system, because at this plant you can understand cows won't go for vacation, although they might deserve it, but the plant of course runs through the complete year. So this energy source is available all the time. And what is the energy source? A dairy's purpose mainly, or work, is to cool down the products, so take the heat out and usually throw it basically into the air, and to clean their equipment. And then you have a lot of wastewater, which both is in a temperature zone of, let's say, 30 to 35 degrees, which can be utilized. These are huge amounts of waste heat, which we by now actually could generate or collect all these energy in one bigger power plant, let's say a power plant or energy plant, and use large heat pumps in order to generate it, to utilize it in the network or in the district heating network at that point. At this point, I realized I didn't show any picture of it, although it's already done and already it's working. Sorry for that. I might, if you like, to send these later around. But what happens during that process of doing this partnership with this dairy is that during engineering you get lots of new ideas, and so the energy plant is quite complicated. And I tried to do a very easy and simple schematic of it, which is this. So don't worry, I already had the 2 minutes and I didn't plan to go into details with you on this. Happy to do that laterwards on another occasion, but the main outcomes of that. in total, I think if we look back 10 years ago, waste heat was really neglected because it's too hard and we don't know how to utilize and the company don't like it and what happens if they get bankrupt. Just go into it, you find solutions, it's quite easy. It's just about talking about it. And what we realize with our customers, the ones who use the energy for heating, they are already saying, why is this a CO2-free energy? Because the Schwarzwaldmilch is just heating with natural gas. And this understanding needs a lot of communication that by using this waste heat, there is no more extra natural gas burned. So it's definitely neutral free. And so everybody can really find this, and we have a good reason to utilize the potential. Also, I said low temperature waste heat is better than some renewable, because groundwater is 12 degrees, we have 30 degrees, so simple physics at that point. And of course, as everything else, we need to have a good strength and weakness analysis to prepare it, and then we can, by the end, utilize longer advantages also for the waste heat giving companies, because at the end, last sentence, if they want to utilize their steam production to something renewable, there might be the heat pumps coming up soon, which might utilize or provide steam, but they need high temperature heat source, and maybe the district heating system can deliver it. So at this point, thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope I could give you some inputs.
Thank you, Christian. Any questions from the audience? You all understood yeah, okay, yeah. Lübke.
I think the slide is really best practice. Lübke from the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. I really think that the slide was best practice, so thanks for that. But to be honest, has there been any funding you received for building up the district heating network, and what kind of funding scheme did you use for that?
Yes, we definitely used the Wärmenetzsysteme 4.0, which was the start of the BEW, which you heard before, and actually the second Wärmeverbund is BEW funded, and that's something which is, I think, really important. For our understanding, it was a very good funding system, and it really enabled these projects. I don't think they would have come if we would not have this funding at that point. And so we are really can only encourage other utilities to use it. Of course, at that time when there might be the financing not that clear of that funding, we also got a little bit nervous. But still, it's a very, very important measurement to really enable utilities to go into the decarbonization path.
There's one up there, I think. Let me just quickly run up with the mic.
Thanks. Yes, I have just one question, especially talking about a lot of times it's talked about that waste heat could be an additional source of income for the providers, but I just want to ask you how it works out for a low temperature waste heat source, and yeah.
Yeah.
If I can just rephrase that, what is the business model here? How does it work for the dairy?
Well, first thing is it's a local dairy. They are owned by the farmers, basically, so they also have a very strong interest of being part of the community. So there's really this PR interest they have. On the other hand, they are also calculating very hard And so it's not rather the selling of the energy, but it's like finding other synergies in building the new equipment. And so we actually were finding some possibilities where they could also benefit from our activities on the place, basically.
So it's what you showed, and what you showed at the beginning, the idea of sort of you go deeply into their process and so on and understand it, and then are able to also provide other efficiency engineering opportunities.
Exactly.
Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that increases your depth of involvement and what you can sell.
Yes. And
as well as
it's a
more
strategic
benefits.
partnership. I mean, we're having this part now, but we are already in deep discussions on how we help them to transform their energy system, their input energy for the steam generation, and so on. So there's a lot of common understanding, and therefore a good, trustful relationship to just go on and successfully finish every other project.
So much more holistic
Yes.
kind of approach. Last question, was feeding waste heat into the grid, was that your way in? Or was that like a waste product of
Actually, our
an
way
overall?
in was 2015, and we were building them as EPC contractor, big cogeneration unit. And so we had our first big project together and just started to know that we can rely on each other. And at that point, actually, the diary already said, please find a way how to utilize our excess heat.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much, Christian.
Yes.
Applause
Thanks.
for that again. And now we move from Freiburg to one of the other small, lovely cities in Germany, Berlin. Daniel Kolleg is here from Berlin Energy and Heat. He heads their sales activities and will give us an overview of how you deal with the same challenges here in the capital.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate the idea of sharing what Danish people do here. So I hope I can share some details from our 2 data center projects here in Berlin. Well, let me start setting the scene. That's who we are. By the way, BEW now, not Vattenfall anymore. But what you see here is it's Berlin, and it's our area of grids, and it's the biggest grid in Western Europe, heating grid. So it's around 2,000 kilometers. And I'm just telling you that because we are operating like 9 big plants and almost 100 smaller CHPs, around 20 megawatt each. And if you calculate all the heat we are delivering and taking standard flats, it would be 1.4 million residential units. So exactly, it's big, and that's a part of the problem, I would say, huh? Because it's still eastern and western part, huh? And we are operating our grids 82. 110, and in the eastern part even to 135 degrees. And of course we are thinking about 4th generation of heating networks, but the fact is that we just had, I think my mobile is disturbing something here. The fact is that we just had our birthday, 140 years BEW, right? And all the buildings which are connected are not ready to get flow of 60 degrees Celsius. They certainly need more, so it's hard to change. But however, that's our path. I will jump through. We need to reach that goal of high amount of renewables, and our aim is to reach it even in 2040, to have it completely green. And the next slide shows you the plan, how we want to do it. It's from our Dekarbonisierungsfahrplan. That's the reduced transformation plan, which you need to bring in if you want to participate of BEW, right? And we already did that. And what you see towards 2040 and 2045, there is a huge amount, it's a fifth, 20%, where we plan to get heat from environmental sources. Can be the River Spree, we have a project there, can be from water treatment, we have a project there, but of course it will be also excess heat, waste heat from different industries, which is hard in Berlin. As you know, there are no industries, bigger industries anymore. It's different than 100 years ago. But so we are looking at the newer industries, and this is why we started almost 2 years ago 2 projects and trying to bring data centers on our sites. So it's 2 sites. It's in the eastern part of our grid area, 2 big plant sites. It's Klingenberg and Marzahn, and they are all refurbished, and there should be space at least in one site for a data center, and that's where we're digging in like 2 years ago. We started that. And I bring you a little detail from that project today that might explain what makes it so different when you bring together 2 industries. And that is a great fit to your workshop like 2 weeks ago from the BMWK. But let's start with this slide. What is heat offtake all about? I mean, you know it, but if we meet a partner or somebody is coming towards us and approaching us, we usually use this slide and the next slide, which is the slide we called always quality of heat, just to make it understand what we need as a district heating operator and what the partner is able to provide. And usually it's about the one, right? It's at the access point. With regard to the data center, it would be the chip, and then you get the 2. It's the raw heat that would be somewhere in the end of the cooling system of the data center, right? And then you of course have to refine it to bring it to the right temperature level, and then you need the grid connection. And you need the backup risk, which is in German the B-Sicherung, not the Versicherung, but the B-Sicherung. And then you actually have, when it's nice and yellow, that it's the quality we want. It's a temperature level, it's B-Sicherung and everything else. But of course, as I explained, Berlin, big city, we need to pick up every puzzle piece of this big jigsaw puzzle, right? So we go after every project, and then the discussions usually start, okay, where is the board of ownership? Who operates the heat pump? And usually a data center, it's not the core business of a data center to operating a heat pump. So we are asked to do, and of course we can do that, and we want to do that, especially on those 2 projects on our sites. So we go somewhere to 3, sometimes to 2, but at the moment, most of the projects we discuss 3. It's important to understand that every project is very, very specific, and so that's why we always present this slide in the very first discussions, just to make it clear and okay that it's not too easy. Okay, what's the price of the heat? I can give you excess heat. Usually after that slide, the discussion is a little different. So the DCs at the heat source, it's very interesting, and I think I can skip that for the audience. That's how it works. Maybe the one thing I should point out that it's usually around 30 degrees today. And I've learned in those 2 years that the data center industry is super conservative. Of course they are, because they can't allow that the servers get shut down, right? And that's why they orientate themselves it's what Judith Packard say, it's a guarantee level, okay, 28 degrees and then it's over. And the other thing maybe at this point, which is important, even if they can deliver a higher amount or higher degree, it's important what they want to have back, right? Because the business case is always you deliver heat, you get cooling back, and the delta K Kelvin has to be small. So if they delivered 50, they should not want 20 back, otherwise the heat pump won't be efficient. And that's the detail I brought, because 2 years ago, we really needed to know who is the best partner we want. And we had a big process, almost like a tender, was invitation to partner, we called it. And I personally learned that the value chain of data centers always starts with the property, and then it's about a property developer, then it's a project developer, then it's the operator, and then in the end it's the end customer for the data center world. Why I'm telling you that is because if you start to make contracts with a partner, we as a grid operator aim for the last one, the end customer, because the end customer is the partner who is interested to deliver the heat, because gets back the cooling, and then you get kind of business case. Because if you do, if you talk to property developers, at least if you try to place it on your own site, they will leave during the project, and you want the one you partner to be on the project the whole time. So what we have today, we have an exclusivity with an operator, very close to the end customers. So that's where what we learned, where we need to focus. And it's actually the same if there's a data center somewhere else, not on your own site. Because if you start talking to the property developer, you should make sure that in the end, because there's a lot of risk in those projects, you get tied to the partner you want, and that would be the operator or the end customer. And then there was another slide. We were digging into business models of data centers, and if data center industry is here, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what we learned. There are different business models. It's the powered shell, the co-location, very traditional, small service in and out all the time, and we are of course looking for stable load profile, and we are looking, as I said, for the partner who is very interested in lowering OPEX. So that's the case in the end, a good case for everybody. And that was the second learning, and with those two learnings we went into this ITP, invitation to partner, and found our partner in February this year. Unfortunately, I can't drop the name now, but we are still in. Maybe to close this, the difficulty in those projects is to, I named it, find the sweet spot to partner with the DC, because the DC usually starts with property, of course, with DSO connection, power grid, and searching for a heat sink. And all those, it's a lot of permits, start very early, and if you get all your building applications through, it might be too late to connect to the heating grid. So that's very difficult. So somewhere in there, in this path, there's the time where you have to connect via contracts and then develop together. Because if you don't develop together, it won't fly. That's the story. Already taught you. That's the usual. Maybe you can add fiber, of course. Property, e-grid connection, and heat sink. But if you ask the other side, the district heating, it's of course a little bit more. We were taking those together, and maybe it's a question in the end. From my point of view, it's more than those two industries. It's more like a thing for the state, the city. It's about city planning. because you need the properties, the proximity, of course, the quality, and all the permitting. And I would like to close with this slide and for the fast run through. And I already saw your little sign. Maybe we have some questions. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Daniel. Questions for Daniel. I have my magic mic ready here. Let me see if there's another one here who hasn't asked a question yet. But first inspiration from you.
That's a question again for me, Rolipka, BMK. One question was, what is the proximity that is still suitable for data center to deliver waste heat to your district heating network?
You mean what's the best distance?
That's best, but the fast away is still usable for you.
It depends. It's like a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but no, I'm seriously. It depends. We had a big project. It was so big, we were even simulating it in our system. It would be 9 kilometers, but it was too risky in the end, right? But it was so big that it looked so nice and maybe valuable in the end. So I said, okay, let's go to a certain point. Those two projects, if they happen, they are directly at the power plant. So this is the perfect world. So it's very dependable from the size, very dependable, and the hours of operations, because it is always the challenge that those guys are, or they can only deliver. I don't know the English term for Können und Vermögen, but it's not like a power plant. So where you can calculate hour-wise in the end. It's not Fahrplan, and so it really depends on the size.
Just one additional question, because data centers are becoming more bigger and bigger, and with 3-digit megawatt data centers becoming reality now here and there. Is 9 kilometer, 10 kilometer the maximum that's possible, or would you say it could be even further away?
I think 9 kilometer was even super far away, and I was so interested that I just wanted to get it calculated. But it's and then it depends where the district pipe is going through. Is it going through? This 9 kilometers was just field. So yeah, what should you do if this is not working in the end? You can't even deliver heat to someone there, right?
You mentioned the sweet spot.
Yeah, the sweet spot.
Since you mentioned the sweet spot, I have to ask about it.
Yeah.
Have you found it? I mean, you said it's to some degree individual, but
it is, yeah. And what we did here is we went into exclusivity contract-wise before we go for the Netzanschluss began together, and then we went for that because that was another learning. Of course, you need the power for the heat pump, the data center, and everything, not only the IT load, right? And
but this is all for new data center.
This
projects,
is for a
right?
new data center. Yeah.
Have you found any case for connecting existing ones?
No, we went into it, but at least my learning is if there's a data center completed, don't touch it. Very conservative and very, and I can understand it.
Thank you, Daniel. Which kind of nicely transitions over to my dear colleague Valentina from Danish Energy Services Hub, who will talk a little bit about two projects. One about data centers and using heat from data centers, which is almost concluded, and a new one which is just beginning. So Valentina, the stage is yours. We look forward to hearing whether maybe there is something for those existing data centers in there as well.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and I'm very happy and pleased that I can present today the two projects Henning mentioned earlier, the Bites to Heat, which focuses on the waste heat of data centers, and a second project which has a broader view on the waste heat. So my name is Valentina, as Henning mentioned, and I'm the project manager at the Energy Services Hub. And I started working on this topic on April, so I'm also very happy to learn more on this field today and in further conversations with you. I will start with focusing on Bytes to Heat, so the project which focuses on the waste heat of data centers, and therefore just give a short introduction of how the main barriers were founded and which were the main obstacles they also identified and tackled with solutions I will present. And then I will go on to the project Avanets, which also want to work with the solutions from the project Bytes to Heat, but also goes further and more broadly in the way of communication through the topic of waste heat. The project Bytes to Heat is funded by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action and has strong partners with them, not as DENEF, but also with the University of Stuttgart and also Impact. And despite of these main partners, they have always had a huge set of stakeholders, which were data centers, but also legal experts or other stakeholders, which they worked with to get the solutions they created. So first of all, they identified the barriers of the waste heat utilization of data centers when they were interviewing a very large part of experts, but not also data centers, but also technology providers and legal experts. And they found 4 main barriers, which I will present. And first of all, I think we heard a lot about it today. So what's the very basic and simple idea of a business model when we want to use and utilize waste heat? So the economic barriers is the first main obstacle they identified. The second one is the legal and regulatory barriers. So you all and me heard today a lot of a broad overview of how the German legislative is right now, but not everyone in Germany who is interested in waste heat utilization heard these kind of overviews. So everyone is a little bit confused, and so there's a lack of transparency and also knowledge about the legal and regulatory barriers. The third one is the lack of communication. So not only within waste heat consumers or waste heat providers, but also kind of the connection between them. So we need a whole set of stakeholders to get together to utilize the waste heat, and that's also lacking in Germany. The fourth barrier is the technical ones. So we also heard about the length of the netze between waste heat providers and also waste heat consumptions, but also about the temperature and all other set of barriers. With these main obstacles identified, they work together with the Dimension stakeholders within agile workshops where they developed solutions, for example, the funding and policy overview, just to get the chance to everyone interested in to get the clear overview as you have today about the legal and regulatory overview, about the funding, about really good and easy ways to get funding to provide actions like presented today with Badenova. The second one is the best practice overview, as also Kerstin Della mentioned before. The project collected about, I think, 100 examples of how waste heat can be utilized from data centers in Germany. So actually, I don't have them all in mind, but I'm sure that when you go to the website and look up, you will find one way or another if you're interested in the way that you could do exactly the same thing with the waste heat utilized from the data center. The two left, I will go further deepen inside, because the project focused on these two barriers, so the lack of communication and also the business management obstacles. The first one, they created a solution which is a quick check tool where they focus on the economic barriers of how to develop a business model utilizing the waste heat from the data center. So if you are, for example, a data center who wants to provide the waste heat, you can download an Excel sheet and put all your data in. And there's a short overview if you don't have the background knowledge as I do. But if you have more deeper knowledge, you can also get more clearer views about how the business model can be in your case. So this is one simple solution which is available online. And the second solution is a matching tool where simply everyone who wants to use waste heat or has waste heat or might be in any way connected to waste heat, such as district heating providers or something else, you can log in and hopefully they get a match at this matching tool. Right now, there are some waste heat providers, so data centers, or also waste heat consumers who wants to meet up, but they don't have the whole opportunity right now. So we are now at that point that, as Henning said, the project Bites to Heat will end. We have the matching tool, but we also know, could that be enough just to have the matching tool? But maybe we do need more. And therefore, we are right now at a situation where we started in April the project Avanets, because we want to focus more on the lack of communication, not just only getting the potential matchings anywhere, but also break silos down and bring the people together. So we learned today that the close partnership and close collaboration, not only in Germany, but also in local areas, is very important. So we want to focus with the project Avanets to provide such connections, to provide local partnerships and get stakeholders together. And we're building up this on the existing best practices, like existing energy efficiency networks already existing in Germany, but we want to add up the focus on waste heat. And the project Avanets not just only focuses on the waste heat of data centers, but we want to broaden our focus on all waste heat in Germany. And we also heard that the heat planning for municipalities is starting right now. So this is also another view of stakeholders looking into how waste heat can be utilized in Germany. So the setup is there, and we have the potential, and now we want the project Avanets to be the caretaker of all the waste heat suppliers and people who are interested in. How we want to do this? We want to do this by building up a knowledge portal where we collect all the knowledge exists, so from Bites to Heat, but also from you guys, and we want to close the knowledge gaps between that, so that everyone who wants to utilize waste heat or has interested in consuming waste heat can look up in the knowledge portal what are the next steps to do. As a second step, we want to build networks, as I said, but also create events where every person can meet. So first of all, we are starting with the Federal Waste Heat Conference in October, where we think Germany, or the waste heat people of Germany, can meet and exchange their ideas or knowledge or experience about waste heat. But we also add up like online and regional exchange and network events where everyone can meet up. And last one is we want to also establish local pilot networks, so where not only waste heat suppliers, but also every stakeholder who has the will to utilize waste heat can match. For example, also regional stakeholders who are interested. So now I hope that every one of you is very excited to start with me to utilize the waste heat. And maybe you will ask yourself, okay, how can I get into this project Avernets? So the first step would be to join us in the Federal Waste Heat Conference on the 10th of October, where we have the big kickoff of our project, which started. The second thing is then when you maybe in your region or municipality want to use the waste heat available or get to the consumers, then you could also get in touch with us, and we will create a network, local network together. And the third thing would be that we not only want to create new pilot projects, pilot networks, but also projects with utilizing waste heat, and therefore we want to maybe create standard cases or standard contracts with you, and that waste heat utilization can be as easy as it should be. So hopefully we can do that together. Just to get a few overview, what will you expect at the federal conference? We will want to look also at data centers in Berlin and regional level, and also, again, the political framework. As I said, it's very important to get all the people to know what is exactly the next steps they want to do. So let's start, and hopefully you will get in touch with me today or another time. You will find my contacts here. Thank you, and tack.
Thank you, Valentina. I think you have a couple of people in the room here already who are more than qualified to sign up for this. Questions for Valentina? No questions from you guys? Maybe I'll have a question. How do you see the synergies? Because I'm still kind of going back to what Ellen said about, and what Christian also said about, when you look at it holistically, you see so much more than waste heat, right? And you're planning on collaborating with networks that are already like self-help groups for industrial companies and so on, where they get together. Do you see how that might work together, looking at how these companies deal with their energy transition in general and with the waste heat potential?
Yes, so I think what I don't know who said it, but there are solutions. We just have to get started and break down the silos. So everyone in Germany maybe uses waste heat in very best practices, but not everyone in Germany knows that. So that's one thing I learned today, that there are existing best practices, and we just want to embrace them and take them through Germany.
And if you want to increase visibility, if you happen to run a data center, please enter your data center into the database. Make yourself known. Don't hide. There are people who are more than willing to take your heat. Thanks, Valentina. And last but definitely not least, it's Erik Heiden from the Competence Center for Waste Heat in Baden-Württemberg. You are project leader there and will give us an insight into what the state of Baden-Württemberg, or the agencies of the state of Baden-Württemberg, are doing to, on the ground, foster the kind of collaboration that we're looking at here.
Exactly. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation to present, or the opportunity to present, the Baden-Württemberg way of waste heat today here in Berlin. My name is Erik Heiden. I'm one of, in the meantime, 3 project managers located at Umwelttechnik Baden-Württemberg, which is the state agency. And my second colleague right there, the third one, stays in Stuttgart and has to work a little bit. Here's a short overview of the following slides. I want to start with the legal basis of our work, followed by an overview how this work looks like, how it is connected with the framework conditions of the federal state of Baden-Württemberg, and how a good project look like from our point of view and from our experience so far. Regarding the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the reworked Climate Protection Act, the reworked Climate Protection Act is the foundation of our competence center. And regarding the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, this act from 2021, not to forget, when looking at the heat planning act from 2023-24, it sets the goals of the federal state 5 years earlier than the ones of the federal republic. So it's kind of a small version of the heat planning act you've seen at the slides from Ms. Deller. One measure to reach this goal of being 5 years faster is the obligation for municipalities to develop municipal heat plans. That includes the evaluation of the heat demand as well as the possibilities to meet this demand in the future. And one option that must be considered within these activities is the utilization of waste heat. To make this possible, this act includes the obligation for companies to provide information regarding their waste heat. And at this point, from the legal perspective, everything necessary has been done. But in reality, when you're looking into the SMEs located on the local level, most companies simply don't have the information they have to provide by this law. This is exactly the point where the competence center comes into play. And the competence center is the central implementing entity located at Umwelttechnik Baden-Württemberg, the state agency for environmental technology and resource efficiency in Baden-Württemberg. The form of a state agency allows us to support companies from a non-profit perspective. And our job is to increase the number of successfully implemented waste heat projects significantly. But because we are located at an agency of the federal state, we are not allowed to provide services that cost money on the market, like Baden-Nova Wärme Plus, for example. We additionally want to connect companies with service providers like engineering consultancies located in Baden-Württemberg and technology manufacturers like industrial heat pump manufacturers to help the regional market around waste heat technologies and services evolve over time. So, how do we work to achieve the goal of increasing the number of successfully implemented waste heat projects? Like, what do we do the whole day? When we started working 3 years ago, the first logical step was to have a closer look at the barriers companies face when it comes to tapping their waste heat potentials. That was the initial step for the development of solutions that help companies to realize waste heat projects. So, the barriers can roughly be outlined by 2 results of the so-called Energy Efficiency Index of the EEP of the University of Stuttgart, which is an annual evaluation of companies in connection with their energy usage. The first question was, you can read it here, do you know the percentage of your energy consumption used for the generation of heat and cold? And it was the year 21, and you can see the result over here, which was kind of disillusional when we saw this first. And what the result here tells us is that almost half of all companies are lacking fundamental data for anything related to waste heat or energy efficiency measures in general. The second result is from the year 2022. Here you see the distribution of the replies to the question, to what extent does your company implement waste heat? And yeah, what you can see is that like 21% had already implemented measures. Some companies were currently reviewing their possibilities, etc. But the overwhelming majority said that waste heat is not a relevant topic for them. And when you compare those results from 2021 and 2022, I think it's a pretty strange coincidence that about half of all companies said that waste heat projects are irrelevant for them, and also about half of all companies answered that they can't allocate their end energy consumption. So they might be connected. Based on this situation, within the companies, we developed our so-called implementation arrow. You can see here. Unfortunately, PowerPoint destroyed it a little bit, but it's readable. The first step towards implemented technical measures is raising the awareness for waste heat potentials and the way aiming at tapping them. Especially the second point is crucial because companies always need a perspective for investing for projects. This is so essential because waste heat projects are way more complex and time-consuming than other energy efficiency projects, and it is easy to lose track over time. And of course, companies need to know that there is a competence center as a base for getting in touch with us and make use of our support, which you can see here, and I'll give you a very short overview in the next following slides. And yeah, sorry for the PowerPoint. The first support measure is called waste heat check. This is a dialogue on site or online between the competence center and the company about its processes, thermal energy demand, and the corresponding infrastructure on site. The goal of a waste heat check is to get basic ideas about what theoretically feasible measures could look like for this specific company, which always have been built and grown on a historical site. Sometimes a waste heat check is executed in combination with other projects like the CAF Plus program, which aims at resource efficiency approaches in SMEs, or the EEKNN mentioned in the last presentation. The person managing CAF Plus is also located at UTBW, so yeah, this state agency fulfills kind of role like a one-stop agency when it comes to sustainability topics for companies located in Baden-Württemberg. As a follow-up of such a waste heat check, it is crucial that the company knows exactly how the next steps look like. For the next step, usually some kind of waste heat concept based on measurements as an important part of gathering base energy consumption data, most companies need urgently and specialized engineering service provider. Finding such an appropriate partner is a huge barrier for almost all SMEs. As a consequence, we name different engineering consultancies that have matching references after every waste heat checks. And furthermore, we combine such a list of possibly fitting service providers with information about the special funding program of the federal state. The program has the conditions shown on this slide here, and it consists of 2 stages. Those conditions are pretty attractive, especially for SMEs, because their upfront costs become significantly lower. What you see here are the conditions of the first stage, like 600 euro per day and a maximum of 30 consultancy days at the first stage. The second stage is the so-called project development phase, which has the same conditions as the first stage, with the exception of up to 100 consultant days instead of 30, and the capped funding at 60,000 euro instead of 18,000 euro. This makes the program pretty attractive even for larger projects as well. The goal is to support possible waste heat projects till the point where a company has to decide to invest or not. If companies struggle with the application form, they can reach out to us and we help them easily by phone or via an MS Teams. So they save lots of time playing ping pong with the bank. When a company decides to invest in a technical waste heat measure, there are several funding programs of the Federal Republic located at the BAFA and KfW Bank. You've seen these on the slides from Ms. Stella. And the federal state doesn't have real additional funding programs to these. Following the successful implementation, the company can apply for different best practice programs located at our agency, so that we have an increasing number of vivid examples which we can use for initial contacts to motivate further companies. In the context of the implementation of a technical measure, it is crucial to make use of the best technology fitting this specific project. As a flanking offering, there's the so-called GreenTech BW Atlas of Umwelttechnik BW, where companies as well as energy consultants can search for appropriate technologies located at the federal state of Baden-Württemberg. So, the knowledge and the money stays in the land. So that was a very short overview about our core activities focused at the support of companies regarding waste heat. In the following slides containing my conclusion, I would like to give you an idea about activities running parallel to these core activities and an example which is transferable to a lot of producing companies, maybe not located at Baden-Württemberg. Beside about 100 waste heat checks during the last 3 years and about 50 presentations, we have grown a large network of consultants and manufacturers of waste heat technologies, as well as other agencies on different levels, so different federal states or even on the federal level of the Federal Republic. We have so far as well set up a training course for certified waste heat consultants, because the consultancy market can't meet the demand of the industry at the moment. We have also organized the first waste heat conference of the federal state so far, which was a huge success in February 2024. One key element for this success could have been the approach of integrating a complying specialist exhibition where participants were able to meet service providers and manufacturers in person in Stuttgart. But it also might have had something to do with the Energy Efficiency Act. We are not quite sure. So, the best practice example. On my last slide, I want to show an example that includes high efficiency potentials and therefore energy savings. What you see here is the part of a production line where chassis of cars get their coating. As a first step, a chassis is washed using hot water, then dried using hot air, followed by a dip coating procedure. All these process steps are pretty energy intensive. The constant demand for hot water and hot air during the first two steps is followed by the constant need for cooling at the dip coating, which gets heated up by the hot chassis permanently. In the past, the cold side has been driven by free cooling and a compression refrigeration system, the hot side by a gas boiler, so pretty conventional. Linking those two sides of this production line using an industrial heat pump resulted in significant energy savings and a payback time of less than 2 years. Sounds good, but well, most SMEs, and Baden-Württemberg is full of SMEs, don't run a production at such a large scale, but have similar circumstances. The simultaneous need for cold and hot liquids. The dip coating can be seen as representative for cooling zones, cooling circuits, or even larger server rooms, whereas the hot side could be a district heating system, for example. So, and what we also what we experienced, or the feedback we got back from a lot of manufacturing companies, was that their cooling demand during the last 2 or 3 years increase brutally during the summer times, and right now they are looking for technical solutions to meet this demand, to be able to run their production in the next summers, because they sometimes had temperatures over 40 degrees, and then the production can't run anymore. Okay, I hope these few slides could provide a rough overview of the Competence Center for Waste Heat in Baden-Württemberg and how we are operating since 3 years now. In the end, the goal of all of our activities is to raise the number of successfully implemented, economically feasible waste heat projects within the federal state. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric, for concluding our round of specific projects and local initiatives. Do we have questions for Eric? There is one. Let me throw you the mic. Can we do that? There you go.
Anually, the Consul General from Denmark in Hamburg. My question is, with your first slide and the overview of how much does the companies actually know about their energy consumption, who is interested, and now you have talked to, I assume, a lot of companies about their energy consumption. Is it true that it's the people who are not interested who also doesn't have anything to do about it? Do you see that some who have no knowledge, actually there's a lot to find? What is the maybe selection bias in those who contact you and those in that survey? What is your experiences now after your interactions with the companies?
There is definitely a bias, because most companies that get in touch with us had first initiatives running regarding their energy consumption. So yeah, that's the bias. But in the end, there are also some pretty old family-owned SMEs that simply say, hey, please help me with my waste heat. Here's my gas bill, here's my electricity bill, what now? But in the end, yeah, I'd guess 2/3 of the companies that can't allocate their energy consumption say or rate themselves as irrelevant for waste heat projects. And well, that's the result in most cases of simply not knowing the technologies that are necessary to utilize their waste heat. Two extreme examples. We often have contact to companies that call us and say, hey, I have so many waste heat. I can almost, save all my oil in the winter. And we get on site and there's such a small air compressor, and that's all. And on the other side, we have companies with furnaces blowing out 400 degrees Celsius air and saying, waste heat, we don't have waste heat. It's not relevant for us. So it's a pretty broad range. Yeah.
Speaking of range, do you have a tendency after these 100 checks of certain industries that are more interested or that have a high potential?
A lot is connected to the automotive industry in Baden-Württemberg, of course. So lots of metalwork, surface treatment, coating technologies, plastic, Kunststoffspritzer, how's it called? Plastic intrusion, different alloy technologies, more the energy intensive, like some pharma companies, even bigger ones, but mostly are SMEs working for the automotive industry. Yeah.
And you wrote, and you said that with your program, you stop at the point where they are ready to make a decision.
That's kind of where the funding program ends.
So do you track your conversion rate? Out of how many initial checks do you get a waste heat project?
We did this some months ago, and the ratio was lower than we expected, but we saw lots of familiar names on the list. So we didn't calculate it, and I think that some companies decide to run a project without funding, simply because it's faster. And so that's kind of, I guess, a big blind spot. Yeah, let's say, don't know, every fourth, maybe.
I would, I don't know what you expected, but that's why it doesn't sound so bad to me. Every fourth, many salespeople, I don't know, you're in sales, many salespeople would be happy if every fourth prospect closed.
I tend to go on site by train, so the effort from our side is pretty high.
Yeah.
So 25%, I don't know.
Right. Okay. If there are no more questions, then I would just ask you. Oh, there's one question. Oh, finally, here from the first row.
Thank you. Sophie Scheller, also from BMWK. We heard the very interesting supermarket example from Denmark, so I wonder if this is also maybe a case for your competence center.
Usually the most markets are part of a big chain. Well, some years ago, we've been in contact to one of those companies running lots of markets in Baden-Württemberg. But yeah, then the pandemic started, and since then we haven't heard anything from them. But I'm pretty sure that they are always trying to standardize their markets, and that what we've seen earlier is exactly, I think, where the energy optimization is going. It's the permanent cogeneration of cold and heat, and I'm pretty sure that they have a lot of some testing prototypes right now, because your energy isn't getting cheaper, so the incentive is there. But in this case, not with us. And in the end, when you want to develop a whole new system of energy supply for these markets, I mean, you get a funding of 60,000 in the end. Yeah, that's not so much. So I guess it's in those black spot where companies simply go forward without using any funding.
Okay, that means that there is a business case even without
there are lots of business
funding. That's a positive note. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for the whole second session panel. And I don't know about you guys, but I think our brains generate a lot of heat now, and ideas popping like popcorn in my head. Maybe just 3 things, and each of you will have their individual takeaway from this today. But 3 things that struck me. One was surplus heat usage is a lot of work, but it's absolutely doable, as many projects here show. And what was exciting was that we didn't really talk about technology, right? It's all there. Paul would say it's simple thermodynamics. Christian would have a simple diagram describing it, but the technology is there, and it's more about the business models and about figuring out how to bring the right people together, and that's what this event here was for. Also, I was struck by the concept of, because we've been, internally at DENF also, we've been thinking about, can we turn waste heat into a commodity? Can this be simple and so on. And on the other hand, now today I learned more about the value of looking at it holistically, and about thinking about, okay, maybe there is something about generating more added value by going deeper, and not looking at waste heat as so much as a commodity, but as an opportunity to look at an industry and help them with the additional challenges that they have, which is also complete decarbonization of all industries, right? So they have a lot of questions, and maybe waste heat can just be part of the answer to those questions, rather than just a separate commodity product. And the third is that Germany and Denmark here. This is one of those cases where we don't just learn from Denmark, but where we can all learn from each other, because we are, when it comes to waste heat integration, all at I would argue, at a similar point, and with similar challenges, similar questions about what would be the right business models. And that's why I thank you again, especially Christian and Willy from the Danish Embassy for coming up with this event and for bringing all of the speakers and all of the partners together for this opportunity, and for Danfoss for supporting it so that we can now all get together in the lobby or upstairs and enjoy some networking over drinks and nibbles and continue the debates that we've started here today. Thank you.